The 29th of January 2009 was meant to be a day to mark a new beginning for a young girl, but tragedy struck. Darcey Freeman, just 2 weeks shy of her 5th birthday, lost her life in a horrifying act on her way to her first day of school. That morning, her father, 35-year-old Arthur Freeman, made a choice that would forever scar his family. Arthur, who had long been estranged from his ex-wife Peter Barnes, had a history marred by domestic violence. As early as April 2007, Peter had confided in her doctor about Arthur's volatile behaviour, describing him as an angry and irrational man who often shoved, pushed and lashed out at both her and their children. Although 3 general practitioners who treated the family did not observe any signs that Darcey or her siblings were in immediate danger, the warnings were there. During an ongoing custody battle, a psychologist had even scrutinised Arthur's violent tendencies, and Peter later revealed in an inquest that she had feared he might become so vengeful as to harm their children in retaliation. The fatal incident came on the day after the court had issued final orders reducing Arthur's access to Darcey, a decision that appears to have shattered him. That morning, overwhelmed by loss and anger, Arthur called a friend in tears, telling them of the custody verdict. In a chilling clue to what was about to happen, he then phoned his ex-wife to say goodbye to her children, adding that she would never see them again. Arthur was scheduled to drive Darcey to school, but they never made it that far. Arthur pulled over at the top of the Westgate Bridge, exited the car, and walked to the rear passenger door where his 2 sons, Benjamin 6 and Jack 2, were seated. However, it was Darcey who he unbuckled. Witnesses later recalled that the little girl, only 4 years old, appeared unnervingly limp and did not resist as Arthur lifted her from her seat. He carried her to the edge of the Westgate Bridge, near its highest point, and in a moment that defies comprehension, hurled her over the railing. Darcey plummeted 58 metres into the murky waters below during the peak of rush hour. Several motorists witnessed the act before Arthur returned to his car and drove away. Rescue teams reacted swiftly. Water police arrived on the scene and managed to retrieve Darcey from the water, though she was in critical condition with severe internal injuries. Despite frantic efforts, she succumbed to her injuries at 1:35 p.m. Almost concurrently, a massive police operation was launched. Officers combed the area in search of Arthur's white Land Cruiser, concerned that the unfolding events might conceal additional crimes. At approximately 10:30 a.m, staff at the Commonwealth Law Courts, home to both the Family Law Court and the Federal Magistrates Court, noticed a man in the foyer in obvious distress. Described as shaking uncontrollably and on the verge of collapse, Arthur was found with his 2 young sons clinging to him as he pleaded with security staff, "Can you take my kids for me?" Police arrived promptly, arrested him, and took him into custody. Witnesses later noted that while in custody, Arthur was too overwhelmed to speak, trembling and weeping in a state of deep shock. The subsequent trial in 2011 resulted in a jury convicting Arthur of murder, having rejected his defence of mental impairment. Although he claimed no recollection of the act, he accepted responsibility for causing his daughter's death. In his findings, the coroner stressed that no one could have reasonably predicted that Arthur would commit such an unspeakable act. Ultimately, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 32 years. The ripple effects of that tragic day extended beyond the courtroom. In 2012, Darcey's mother, Peter Barnes, initiated civil action against Vic Roads, contending that long-standing warnings about the need for safety barriers on the Westgate Bridge had been ignored. A state coroner's report dating back 8 years had recommended installing anti-suicide barriers, a measure the Victorian government only began implementing in February 2009 following Darcey's death. The civil case was eventually settled for an undisclosed amount. This heartbreaking series of events not only ended a young life, but also ignited a broader conversation about family violence, mental health, and public safety measures, a conversation that tragically continues to this day.